If you've ever been to a Disney park anywhere across the world, whether it be Paris, Japan, California, or Florida, there's at least several famous properties you've come to expect there. Star Wars, Frozen, Toy Story, Snow White, Cars, and plenty of other classic films from their old and new library. But there's one important and seminal character that's never mentioned or given any attention in any of the company's rides or theme parks, or at least since his feature film first came out. I'm of course talking about 2005's Chicken Little. The third feature film from director Mark Dindal, who previously directed two cult classics that both flopped at the box office, but thankfully have garnered their good reputations that both of them deserve. Especially Emperor's New Groove, like that's genuinely one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. Notable for its troubled production history and constant unnecessary studio notes given to the film's director, the film was expected to be Disney's big answer to Pixar, their vastly more successful studio ally in the early 2000s, who found a lot of success in producing computer-animated movies to critical and commercial acclaim. Chicken Little was expected to rival the biggest movies from Pixar, and hopefully become one of Disney's biggest franchises. The company promoted the hell out of this thing. There was almost no escaping it. And if Chicken Little succeeded, it could prove to Pixar that Disney could produce works on par or even superior to their own. And then the movie underperformed, got terrible reviews, and Disney bought Pixar 2 months later. And so with the renewed success the studio finally got with movies like Tangled, Wreck-It Ralph, Big Hero 6, and Moana, people look back and scoff at this movie as an utter embarrassment to the studio's name. Some even go as far as calling it the worst Disney movie ever.
Chicken Little is one of the worst animated movies I've ever seen. I can't believe Disney actually stooped this low. Like, holy shit, you have to try to make a film this awful.
Fuck this movie. No, seriously. I fucking hate it with a burning passion. This is Disney's, without a doubt, worst movie.
It's the most stupid, cruel, ugly, and nasty, boring, forgettable Disney movie I've ever watched. I personally consider Chicken Little the absolute worst Disney movie of all time.
But what if I told you that it's actually not that bad? That it's actually better than you remember? In any case, let me explain to you what I think this movie does right and why. If you're someone who hated this movie when it came out, or has seen it more recently and still hates it, I hope this can offer a somewhat more nuanced and positive perspective. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to hail this as some kind of misunderstood gem or something. This movie is not that great, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the worst. The characters are pretty cruel, the color palette is pretty ugly while the animation hasn't held up very well, and the jokes miss more often than they hit. Like, it's baffling that the whole town is this cruel towards this small chicken just because he falsely claims that the sky is falling. Like, I get it's a pretty preposterous claim, but in a wacky setting like this where crazy stuff seems to happen quite often, it's hard to believe they'd be this offended over such a false alarm. There's also a lot of pop culture references that feel like they're just there to reference stuff than to be actual jokes. And yes, the dad is pretty mean. I like how they got together at the end though, and not to mention how Chicken Little just straight up gave up on his dad believing him near the end. Like, yeah, you go ahead Chicken Little, tell your dad to go fuck himself. So what are the stuff I actually like in this movie? There's actually quite a bit, and I'll let you know those things right now. Number 1. Its cartoony style is more distinct than any Disney film since. While every Disney movie in the modern age is focused on looking and being rendered super photorealistically, Chicken Little feels like an authentic attempt at being a feature-length cartoon. The characters all have Tex Avery-esque designs, and all move like cartoon characters. It's a nice departure from the other CG animated movies for its time, and I appreciate that. 2. I like the alien invasion concept meshed with the sky is falling premise. I think it's cleverly integrated, and the alien designs and their tech look really neat and original. I applaud them. 3. Morcubine Porcupine.
Yo.
4. It has one killer soundtrack. Like, you can't go wrong with One Little Slip, This Is the End of the World as We Know It, and so many other great ones. Number 5. Morcubine Porcupine.
No.
6. The fictional movie at the end based on Chicken Little was awesome, and having Adam West voice Chicken Little as Ace was genuinely genius. It reminded me of the last scene of Pee-wee's Big Adventure actually, and how they portrayed him as a James Bond type character. Number 7. I like the chaotic and wacky energy to this film. They throw a lot at you and portray this world in a really unique way, similar to Rocko's Modern Life and how bizarre that universe was. Number 8. Morcubine Porcupine.
Whoa.
Number 9. You might think I'm crazy for saying this, but I do appreciate this movie's attempts at being a more cynical Disney film. It's so easy for Disney to portray their characters so superficially, and all of them as nice people in their films nowadays, when here, they don't portray the world as this happy-go-lucky Candyland where everyone is nice to each other all the time. People are assholes, society sucks, and this movie isn't afraid to show that. Like I said, this movie is definitely on the weaker side of Disney films, but at least it's interesting enough to be far from their worst. I have a newfound appreciation for this movie's vision and personality after some of their recent lackluster efforts like Strange World and Wish, because I'd rather a film fall spectacularly flat on its face than a movie do absolutely nothing interesting or substantive at all. You could easily describe either of these movies as Disney on autopilot, but Chicken Little doesn't feel like that at all. It makes the most bizarre creative decisions out of any Disney film to date, and for that, I have a weird amount of respect for it. Also, I think it's funny how Chicken Little unironically has a better soundtrack than the entirety of Wish. I know it's because they're mostly licensed songs, but still. I'm still sad that we never got to see Mark Dindal's original vision, because it sounded pretty fun. The idea of the main character going to a summer camp where a pack of wolves disguise themselves as sheep to prey on all the children is a really funny idea. But this doesn't mean the movie should be brushed aside by the company as if it never happened. In fact, the character actually made an appearance last year in Disney's Once Upon a Studio short celebrating the company's 100th anniversary. And instead of pretending like their critically panned films never happened, all of the characters from their entire catalog make an appearance. Except Song of the South, because the Disney executives would all have the racism police at their doorstep if they included it. Even The Black Cauldron, which was the film that nearly killed the company, also had his characters show up briefly. And while I won't deny that's a better film overall, it also shows that Disney shouldn't be afraid of failure, because their successes wouldn't come without it. As much as I dislike the studio's recent outings, I think it will lead to a creative rebirth for them like so many of their past flops have. So yeah, even if you hate Chicken Little, you can't deny that it's not forgettable, and that's something we can all agree on. By the way, speaking of current Disney, don't be surprised if that upcoming Moana sequel isn't very good.